I've been running my own business for the past 7 years now, but the journey wasn't easy, and I still look back and wonder how I made it through. This is the story of how I went from having no savings to managing a thriving business. I always knew I wanted to be my own boss. Ever since I was a kid, I dreamed of owning something big. But, like most people, I had no idea where to start. I went to college, graduated with a degree in marketing, and ended up working for a small digital marketing agency. The pay was decent, but the work felt soul-sucking. Every day felt like a repeat of the last. I wasn't challenged, and I certainly wasn't growing. I kept telling myself that it was just a stepping stone, that I'd eventually move on to something better. But inside, I felt like I was slowly dying. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, I found myself browsing the internet, looking up ways to start my own business. I was thinking of opening a coffee shop or a small clothing brand, something that could give me the creative freedom I was craving. I spent hours researching different business models, but nothing felt like the right fit. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a YouTube video that changed everything. The video was about building an online store. The idea of running an e-commerce business sounded like it could be the perfect fit for me. It wasn't just about making money. It was about creating something from the ground up, with the ability to scale it as big as I wanted. I thought, why not give it a try? After all, I was tired of playing it safe. So, I took the plunge. I remember the day I made the decision like it was yesterday. I had $200 saved up in my bank account, a tiny cushion that I'd been holding on to for emergencies. But instead of waiting for the perfect time, I used that money to buy a domain, set up a website, and purchase inventory for my first batch of products. I didn't know anything about dropshipping, digital marketing, or SEO, but I was hungry to learn. It was either sink or swim. The first few months were rough. I barely sold anything, and the traffic to my site was dismal. I spent every free moment learning about online marketing, reading blog posts, watching YouTube tutorials, and signing up for every free webinar I could find. I tried everything: Facebook ads, Google ads, influencer marketing, you name it. Some of it worked, but most of it didn't. I spent a lot of money on ads that didn't lead to sales, which almost wiped me out. But I didn't give up. I kept experimenting, testing, and optimizing. I started to get the hang of it, slowly but surely. I learned that building an e-commerce business wasn't just about having a great product. It was about finding the right audience, understanding their pain points, and offering a solution that was better than anything else on the market. Once I figured that out, sales started to trickle in. By year 2, I was starting to see some real progress. My website's traffic had grown steadily, and I had a small but loyal customer base. I'd also managed to get a few positive reviews that helped build social proof and credibility. I was still working full-time at the agency, but my online store was starting to feel like a full-time job in itself. I had to make a decision: either quit my job and go all in on the business, or keep it as a side hustle and risk losing momentum. I decided to take the leap. I left my 9-to-5 job and started working on my business full-time. That was one of the scariest decisions of my life, but it was also the best one I ever made. I had no safety net, no steady paycheck coming in, and absolutely no guarantee that my business would take off. But something in me just clicked. I felt a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in years. For the next 6 months, I worked like a maniac. I was putting in 12-hour days, sometimes more. I would wake up early to check emails, run ads, and analyze my sales. I'd spend the afternoons handling customer service and sourcing new products. And I'd stay up late working on content for my social media channels. I barely had time for myself, but I didn't care. I was building something. I was seeing progress, even if it was slow. Then came the breakthrough. One of my products went viral. It wasn't anything extraordinary, just a simple item I'd sourced from a supplier in China, but for some reason, it resonated with people. Sales started pouring in, and for the first time, I felt like I might actually be able to make it. At that point, I started scaling my operations. I hired a small team of freelancers to help with customer service, graphic design, and social media management. I also invested in better software to manage my inventory, track shipments, and handle orders. I knew I couldn't do everything on my own anymore. The business had outgrown my capacity, and I needed to be strategic if I wanted to take it to the next level. Year 4 was the year everything started to click. My revenue more than doubled, and I started attracting the attention of some major influencers and bloggers in my niche. I partnered with a few of them to promote my products, and that gave my brand the credibility it needed to grow even faster. The business wasn't just surviving anymore, it was thriving. Looking back, I can see that my success wasn't just about working hard. It was about being willing to fail, learn, and adapt. I made countless mistakes along the way. I lost money on bad ads, wasted time on unproductive tasks, and faced more setbacks than I can count. But through it all, I kept moving forward. I never let failure define me. Instead, I used it as fuel to keep pushing. Now, here I am, 7 years into the business, managing a company with a 7-figure revenue and a small but dedicated team. I'm no longer working 12-hour days, and I've built a system that allows me to focus on the strategic side of things. I've learned how to delegate, automate, and focus on growth. My life looks completely different than it did back when I was sitting in a cubicle, daydreaming about entrepreneurship. If there's one thing I want people to take away from my story, it's this: there is no straight path to success. It's messy, unpredictable, and full of obstacles. But if you're willing to work your ass off, learn from your mistakes, and keep adapting, there's no limit to what you can achieve. So if you're on the fence about starting your own business, or if you've been stuck for a while, just remember, it's not about the perfect plan or the perfect timing. It's about taking that first step and learning as you go. Because once you start, the rest will follow. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I want to share the journey that led me to becoming a successful entrepreneur after years of frustration, mistakes, and countless sleepless nights. It wasn't always pretty, and I'm still far from making it in the traditional sense, but I've come a long way. If you're an aspiring entrepreneur, maybe my story will offer some insights and help you feel less alone on this roller coaster. I'll start by saying that I wasn't one of those people who was always trying to sell something as a kid. I didn't have the classic lemonade stand or hustle in school. I was actually pretty average in most respects. I grew up in a small town with working-class parents. My mom worked as a nurse, and my dad was a mechanic. They were both hard workers and instilled the value of a good job and steady income in me from a young age. I took the conventional route, graduated from high school, went to college, and got a degree in marketing. It was the safest path for me, and honestly, I wasn't sure what else to do. I wasn't particularly passionate about marketing, but it was practical, and I thought it would lead to a stable job. After graduation, I landed a position at a mid-sized marketing firm. The pay wasn't great, but it was a start. Fast forward a few years, and I was in the same place, just a little older and a little more frustrated. I wasn't growing, I wasn't challenged, and worst of all, I felt like I was wasting time. I'd sit in meetings where people were debating the smallest details of a project, while I daydreamed about doing something completely different. Around this time, I started reading books on entrepreneurship, watching TED Talks, and listening to podcasts about successful business owners. I began to feel like there was more to life than the cubicle I was sitting in. One day, after one too many late nights thinking about my future, I made a decision. I wanted to build something for myself. It wasn't going to happen overnight, but I was done waiting for an opportunity to come knocking. So, I started brainstorming ideas. The first idea was a total flop. I tried launching an online store selling eco-friendly products. It was trendy at the time, and I thought it would be a hit. I spent a decent amount of money building a website, sourcing products, and getting everything set up. I thought I was ready. I even quit my day job to go full-time into this venture. But the sales never came. I had no audience, no marketing plan, and no clue how to actually drive traffic to my site. After about 6 months of pouring money into it, I had to shut it down. I felt like a failure. All those long nights of working after hours had amounted to nothing. I didn't know what to do next, so I returned to my marketing job. At first, I was embarrassed to tell anyone about the failed business, but I soon realized I wasn't alone. A lot of my colleagues had dabbled in side hustles that had fizzled out. We'd joke about it, but deep down, I felt like I had let myself down. But here's the thing about failure. It's not the end unless you let it be. I decided to try again, this time with a more focused approach. I had learned a lot during my first attempt, even though it didn't work out. I knew that success in business wasn't about avoiding failure. It was about learning from it. So, I started doing something completely different. Instead of launching a product, I started focusing on services. I had spent years working in marketing, and I realized that my expertise could help others. I created a small freelance marketing agency. At first, it was just me, offering copywriting and digital strategy services to local businesses. I reached out to friends, family, and acquaintances who might need help with their marketing efforts. I didn't make much at first, but I was learning how to sell myself and my services. I started with small projects for small clients. Slowly, I built up my portfolio. It wasn't glamorous work, social media posts, email newsletters, the occasional blog, but it was a start. The turning point came about a year into this new venture. One of my clients, a small coffee shop, asked if I could help them revamp their branding and launch an email marketing campaign. I saw this as an opportunity to create something bigger. I put together a comprehensive plan, did extensive research on their target audience, and pitched a complete overhaul. They loved it. The campaign was a massive success, and that client referred me to others in their network. That snowball effect began. Over the next few months, my reputation started to grow, and I was getting more and more clients. I was able to hire a few freelancers to help with the workload, and eventually, I formed a small team. I also realized that I needed a system in place to handle projects, timelines, and clients more efficiently. I invested in project management software and created standard operating procedures for everything, from onboarding new clients to delivering final work. This saved me so much time and reduced stress. By the second year of my marketing agency, I had reached a level where I was consistently profitable. I was able to hire full-time employees, and I made the decision to scale. We began working with larger businesses and offering more complex services like SEO, paid ads, and video marketing. It was exciting to see our team grow and our client base expand. But let me be clear, this wasn't smooth sailing. There were times when I wasn't sure if I could make payroll, times when I doubted myself, and times when I thought about quitting altogether. There were clients who didn't pay on time, contracts that fell through, and projects that didn't deliver the expected results. But through it all, I learned the importance of resilience and adaptability. Running a business is never easy, but if you're willing to keep pushing forward, you can get through the tough times. Fast forward to today, and my marketing agency is thriving. We're working with clients all over the country, and we've expanded into content creation and influencer marketing. I still get the same thrill from helping businesses grow, and I've been able to scale in a way that allows me to step back a little and focus on the bigger picture. It hasn't been a linear journey, and there have been plenty of bumps along the way, but it's been worth it. If you take anything away from my story, let it be this. Entrepreneurship is a long, difficult road, and failure isn't the end of the journey. It's just part of it. Every failure, every setback, is a chance to learn and grow. Keep trying, keep learning, and don't be afraid to pivot when things aren't working. You don't need to have all the answers up front, and you don't need to follow a conventional path. The important thing is to get started, learn from your mistakes, and keep moving forward. I never thought I'd become an entrepreneur. My story starts in a small town where the most exciting thing was the occasional car wash or bake sale at the local community center. But somehow, here I am, running a successful online business that helps people around the world, and looking back, I can barely recognize the person I was when I started. This is the story of how a random idea, mixed with a lot of desperation, hard work, and a healthy dose of luck, turned into a real business. I grew up in a working-class family. My parents worked hard, but there was never really much to spare. We didn't travel, we didn't go out to eat at fancy places, and my friends always had more than I did. That being said, I had a pretty happy childhood. There was love and support. But I remember the constant feeling that there was something missing. My parents would always tell me that if I worked hard enough, I could achieve anything, but I had no idea how to get started or what that even meant. Fast forward to my early 20s. I had just graduated from college with a degree in marketing, and instead of feeling excited about my future, I felt stuck. I didn't want to work in a corporate job, shuffling papers or sitting in endless meetings. I had dreams, big dreams, but no direction. My first real job was a 9-to-5 gig in a small advertising agency. I didn't hate it, but it wasn't fulfilling. Every day felt like I was watching the clock, counting the minutes until I could go home. The idea of starting my own business had been in the back of my mind for years, but I never had the courage to actually do something about it. Then one night, while sitting on my couch scrolling through social media, I saw an ad for a course on how to make money through e-commerce. Something clicked. Maybe it was the fact that the person running the ad seemed like a normal, everyday person who had started a business from scratch. Maybe it was the desperation I felt at the time to escape my 9 to 5 grind. Whatever it was, I signed up for the course on a whim. The first few days of the course were overwhelming. I was learning about dropshipping, setting up an online store, Facebook ads, Instagram influencers, product research, the whole 9 yards. It was all so foreign to me, and I was terrified of failing. But I couldn't stop. I felt like if I didn't give this a real shot, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. So, I spent every spare minute I had reading, watching tutorials, and working on my business after work. I can't even tell you how many nights I stayed up until 2 or 3 in the morning, exhausted but determined. After about a month, I finally launched my first online store. I remember the excitement when I saw my first sale come through, $25. It wasn't much, but it felt like everything. I couldn't stop refreshing the page to check if more sales were coming in. But after that first sale, nothing. It was like my store had vanished into the void of the internet. No matter how much I tweaked my ads, added new products, or changed the website design, the sales were non-existent. That's when I almost gave up. It was discouraging. The money I had spent on ads, the time I had invested, and the doubt that started creeping in made me question if I had made the right decision. I had no background in business. I didn't have a mentor. I was just a regular person trying to make something work. But deep down, I knew I couldn't quit. I thought about all the people who had succeeded, all the businesses that had started just like mine. They didn't give up, so neither would I. So, I took a step back and decided to reevaluate everything. I spent weeks learning more about my target market, studying what successful e-commerce businesses were doing, and focusing on ways to improve my store's conversion rate. Slowly but surely, things started to click. I redesigned my store, made my product descriptions more engaging, and refined my ad campaigns. I also realized the importance of building trust with my customers, so I started engaging more on social media, responding to questions, and offering personalized customer service. Then, a breakthrough came. One of my ads went viral. I still can't figure out what made it take off, but suddenly, I was flooded with orders. In 1 month, I made more sales than I had in the entire previous year. It was overwhelming, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. I had to hire help just to keep up with customer support and packaging orders. I had no idea how to manage all of this, but I knew I couldn't let it slip away. Over the next year, the business grew steadily. I focused on building a brand, not just a store. I started offering value through content, creating blog posts, video tutorials, and social media posts that resonated with my audience. I invested in email marketing, customer retention strategies, and expanded my product line. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of hiccups along the way. I had suppliers who failed to deliver on time, employees who didn't work out, and some tough financial months where I wondered if I'd ever be able to scale the business. But through it all, I kept learning, adapting, and pushing forward. Eventually, I reached the point where my business was no longer just a side hustle. It was my full-time job. I'd outgrown the small office I started in and moved into a larger space. My team grew, and I hired people who were better than me in areas where I lacked expertise. I realized I couldn't do everything, and that was a huge lesson in letting go and trusting others. Looking back, the one thing I'm most proud of is the impact my business has had. I receive emails and messages from customers all the time telling me how my products have helped them, how my company has changed their lives. That's the real reason I keep doing this. Sure, the money is nice, but it's the ability to help people that makes it all worth it. Today, I look at the business I've built, and it feels surreal. From that $25 sale to where I am now, it's been a roller coaster, but I wouldn't change a thing. Entrepreneurship isn't easy. In fact, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it's also been the most rewarding. So if you're reading this and feeling like you're stuck, wondering if it's even possible to start your own business, just know that you're not alone. It's hard, but it's worth it. Keep pushing. You might not see the results right away, but persistence pays off. If I can do it, so can you. I'm a 28-year-old entrepreneur, and my journey to where I am today wasn't easy. I wasn't born into money, nor did I have a silver spoon. I grew up in a working-class family in a small town where the only goal most people had was to graduate high school, get a stable job, and live the life that had been set out for them. I wanted more than that, but I wasn't sure how to get there. This is my story, how I built my first real business from the ground up, and how it changed my life. I remember being in high school, staring out the window of my classroom, thinking to myself, there has to be more than this. I didn't know what this was, but but I knew that the traditional path wasn't for me. I didn't like the idea of getting stuck in a 9-to-5 job I hated, just to pay bills and get by. I wanted to create something of my own, something that could stand the test of time. But I had no idea where to begin. After high school, I enrolled in college with the vague hope that a degree would help me figure things out. I studied business, not because I loved it, but because it felt like the most practical choice. It wasn't until my junior year that I had a breakthrough moment. One of my professors invited a local entrepreneur to speak to our class. The guy was in his 40s, had started his own tech company, and sold it for a massive profit. As he spoke, something clicked. I realized that I didn't need to follow a traditional path. If I was going to be successful, I needed to start thinking like an entrepreneur. But the problem was, I had no idea where to start. I didn't have the capital to launch a big tech company, and honestly, I didn't have the skills yet. So I decided to take baby steps. I started small. I began reading every book on entrepreneurship I could find. I listened to podcasts, attended local networking events, and sought out mentors who could guide me. I even started a small side hustle selling custom t-shirts online. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. The t-shirt business was a disaster at first. I didn't know anything about sourcing materials, managing inventory, or marketing. I made every mistake in the book. I ordered too many shirts, didn't do enough market research, and spent way too much money on ads that didn't convert. At one point, I thought about quitting, but something inside me wouldn't let me. I refused to give up that easily. The turning point came when I decided to pivot. Instead of focusing on selling t-shirts to everyone, I honed in on a specific niche: dog lovers. I redesigned my website, created a brand identity, and started offering unique, high-quality shirts that dog owners would love. I focused on building a community around my brand. I interacted with customers on social media, offered giveaways, and even collaborated with dog influencers. Slowly but surely, sales started coming in. It wasn't a huge success overnight, but it was a start. I learned more in those few months than I had in the years leading up to that point. I realized that building a business wasn't just about having a good product. It was about understanding your market, building relationships, and continually improving. After a year of running my t-shirt business, I decided it was time to move on to something bigger. I had saved up enough money to invest in a new venture. At this point, I had started to build a network of like-minded individuals who were also entrepreneurs, and one of them, a software developer, introduced me to the idea of starting a SaaS, software as a service, business. The concept intrigued me. The recurring revenue model was appealing, and I saw it as a way to scale faster than a physical product-based business. I had no tech background, but I decided to dive in. I partnered with my developer friend, and together we launched our first software product, a simple project management tool aimed at small businesses. We started small, targeting local businesses and startups who needed a cost-effective solution. At first, it was slow. We had some customers, but the growth was minimal. We spent countless hours tweaking the product, adding features, and trying to figure out what would make it stand out in a crowded market. Then came the breakthrough. After months of trial and error, we realized that the key to our success wasn't just about building a product. It was about creating an ecosystem that worked for small business owners. We integrated our tool with popular platforms like Slack, Google Drive, and Trello, making it easier for businesses to manage everything in one place. We also offered customer support that was above and beyond what most competitors provided. Slowly but surely, word spread, and our user base grew. As the business grew, so did the challenges. We had to hire employees, manage cash flow, and deal with the ups and downs of running a growing company. But through it all, I learned valuable lessons that I carry with me today. One of the most important things I learned is that success in business doesn't come from avoiding failure. It comes from learning how to fail and bounce back. Every mistake I made was an opportunity to learn and improve. Today, my SaaS business has over 10,000 active users, and we're on track to hit 7 figures in revenue this year. I have a team of 25 employees who are all passionate about the product, and I'm proud of what we've built. But what's even more rewarding is the fact that I'm living proof that anyone can make it if they're willing to work hard and learn from their mistakes. Looking back, I can see that every decision I made, every risk I took, led me to where I am today. There were times when I thought about quitting, when I felt overwhelmed, but I'm glad I pushed through. The journey hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. For anyone reading this who feels stuck or unsure about their future, I want you to know that it's never too late to start. You don't need a fancy degree, a huge budget, or a perfect plan. What you need is determination, a willingness to learn, and the ability to adapt when things don't go according to plan. If I can do it, so can you. It's 2007, and I'm sitting in my cramped apartment in New York City, staring at a computer screen, wondering if I've made the biggest mistake of my life. I'm 25 years old, with $3,000 left in my bank account, and a business idea that I'm convinced is going to change the world. I've had this idea for months, but every time I talk to someone about it, I get the same response: that's a terrible idea. There's no market for that. But I didn't listen. I couldn't. You see, when you've spent the last 3 years trying to find your place in the world, a little voice telling you you can't do this doesn't stop you. It pushes you forward. And so, on this particular rainy day, I decide to pull the trigger. I register a domain, pay for a bare-bones website, and set up a small ad campaign on Facebook, hoping to get my first few customers. I've always had an obsession with tech, gadgets, and the way people interact with products. But my true passion has always been the web, specifically how to make it easier for people to find what they need online. This idea I had was about creating a platform that made online shopping simpler, faster, and more personalized. There were other players in the market, of course, giants like Amazon and eBay, but I believed that there was room for something better, something more tailored to the consumer's needs. I was an idealist, no doubt, but that drive was what kept me up at night. I wanted to build something that would give people what they wanted, before they even knew they wanted it. Sounds lofty, I know, but that's how every great startup begins, right? With a dream that seems impossible, but with the kind of determination that's relentless. At first, the journey was harder than I expected. My Facebook ads weren't bringing in customers, and my website was clunky, to say the least. I spent hours tweaking the back end of the site, rewriting code, and making sure everything worked. I'm not a programmer by training, but I figured I'd have to learn on the fly if I wanted this to work. Around that time, I started seeking advice from people who had been down the entrepreneurial path before. The first person I reached out to was my college friend, David. He was a few years ahead of me and had already started a small tech company that was starting to gain some traction. He'd made mistakes, learned from them, and had more experience than I could dream of. We met for coffee one afternoon, and I laid out my plan. David listened quietly, then gave me the blunt feedback I needed. You're trying to build something that's too broad. Focus. Pick a niche, nail that, and expand. Otherwise, you're just one of a million guys building a generic platform. I nodded, but honestly, I wasn't sure how I was going to narrow things down. Everything seemed essential to the product I was building. But over the next few weeks, I took David's advice to heart. I pivoted, narrowing my focus to a specific segment of the online shopping experience. I started working on a recommendation engine, a tool that could predict what people would want based on their behavior and past purchases. It was slow going. The recommendation engine wasn't perfect, but it was better than anything else out there. And slowly, the trickle of customers began to grow. They weren't lining up at the door, but the feedback I was getting was overwhelmingly positive. By 2009, my business had grown enough for me to quit my day job and focus on it full-time. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I could finally call myself an entrepreneur. But the reality of running a business full-time was much harder than I had imagined. I was no longer just a tech guy. I was now the CEO, the marketing department, the customer support team, and the accountant. I didn't sleep much. During this period, I learned the importance of building a strong team. I was wearing too many hats, and as much as I tried, I couldn't do it all myself. So, I hired my first few employees, a small but passionate team of tech-savvy people who believed in the product as much as I did. One of them, a brilliant developer named Sarah, built a new version of the recommendation engine that was faster and more accurate than anything I had ever envisioned. She also taught me to focus on user experience, something I had overlooked in my earlier stages. In 2011, we received our first big break. A venture capital firm took interest in our company. I remember the pitch meeting vividly. My heart was pounding as I walked into the conference room, only to be greeted by two investors who were genuinely intrigued by what we had built. They had some tough questions, but I answered them with confidence. They agreed to invest, and just like that, my small startup was about to take a giant leap forward. With the additional capital, we were able to scale the business. We hired more employees, expanded our marketing efforts, and fine-tuned the platform. We soon began to see the results: more users, better feedback, and partnerships with major retailers. We weren't just a small fish in a big pond anymore. We were carving out our own space in the market. By 2013, things were really taking off. Our platform was integrated with over a dozen major retailers, and we had just launched a mobile app that allowed users to shop on the go. But with success came new challenges. The market was becoming more competitive, and big players like Amazon were starting to replicate some of the features we had pioneered. We had to evolve. In 2015, we pivoted again. Instead of just being a recommendation engine for online shoppers, we became a full-fledged marketplace with a focus on personalization. We integrated machine learning and artificial intelligence to make our recommendations smarter and more accurate. We also introduced social shopping features that allowed users to share and discover products in a way that felt more organic. It was a gamble, but it paid off. By 2017, we had over 10 million active users, and our revenue had increased tenfold. The company had grown beyond what I had ever imagined, but it still felt like we were just getting started. The tech world had changed so much in the last decade, and the opportunities seemed endless. Fast forward to today, and I'm sitting in a high-rise office in the heart of Silicon Valley, overlooking the city below. My company has been acquired by one of the largest tech giants in the world, and I'm now in a position where I can take a step back and think about what's next. I don't know if I'll ever be able to replicate the thrill of those early days, the excitement of building something from nothing, the ups and downs of starting a business. But I do know that every struggle, every setback, and every late-night coding session was worth it. Being an entrepreneur isn't easy, and it doesn't come with guarantees. But if you have a vision, if you can focus, and if you're willing to learn from your mistakes, the possibilities are endless. I'm proof of that. I've always been the kind of person who didn't like to follow a typical path. Growing up in a small town where everyone had their minds set on following the same routine, get a degree, find a stable job, get married, and live a predictable life, I knew I didn't fit in. I wasn't rebellious for the sake of rebellion, but I just couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant to do something different, something big, something that had the potential to change my life and maybe even the lives of others. My name is David, and this is the story of how I went from being a broke college dropout with zero business experience to running a multi-million-dollar startup in less than a decade. It all started in college, where I was an average student at best. I didn't care much for the lectures, and I had no clue what I wanted to do with my life. I wasn't failing, but I certainly wasn't excelling. I always had a side hustle, though, something I could use to make a bit of extra cash. It started with simple things like reselling items online and gradually grew into more ambitious projects. I quickly realized that I loved business, loved the process of creating something from nothing, and loved seeing that idea come to life in the form of cash flow. One of my first profitable side projects was flipping old textbooks. I found a niche market of international students who needed specific textbooks that weren't available in their home countries. With just a couple $100 to start, I bought textbooks from used bookstores and sold them online to students. It wasn't glamorous work, but it taught me valuable lessons in sourcing, sales, and marketing. By the time I dropped out of college in my sophomore year, I was running a small but profitable operation. My parents were, of course, disappointed. They had always dreamed of me graduating, getting a corporate job, and settling down, as they put it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this business was just a stepping stone, and I needed to focus on what was next. I was confident that the future held more, and the freedom to create something bigger was what drove me forward. I moved to a bigger city, not knowing exactly what I wanted to do next, but convinced that I needed to surround myself with people who thought the way I did. I immersed myself in the startup culture, attending meetups and networking events. I was broke, but I was hungry. I needed to find an idea that could take me from side hustles to something significant. It wasn't until I was hanging out at a startup event in a dingy co-working space that I had my aha moment. I was talking to a fellow entrepreneur, and he mentioned something about the struggles of getting quality products from overseas. He was importing cheap gadgets from China, but had to go through a maze of unreliable suppliers and frustrating communication. It hit me then. There was a major gap in the market for a trustworthy platform that would connect small businesses to reliable overseas suppliers, simplifying the entire process. Importing wasn't just a challenge, it was an art form, and very few people knew how to navigate it properly. I decided to dive into the idea. I didn't have any technical background, but I knew this was a problem that needed solving. I teamed up with a developer I met at one of the events, and we began building the platform. It was a grueling, exhausting year filled with late nights and coding sprints. I was living off ramen and taking odd jobs here and there just to stay afloat. I remember having to cut down on expenses so much that I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor of the office, which was barely big enough to fit 2 people. The platform we built was simple but effective. It was designed to connect small businesses with vetted overseas suppliers, cutting down on the time it took to find reliable partners and drastically reducing the risk of dealing with fraud. But just building the product wasn't enough. We needed to get people to trust us. The marketing aspect of the business was tough. We had no budget for paid advertising, so I relied on word of mouth, cold emailing, and some guerrilla marketing tactics. I created content, blog posts, and videos, sharing my story and explaining why our platform was different from the competition. Slowly but surely, the platform began to gain traction. Small businesses that were struggling to find trustworthy suppliers started signing up. I remember getting my first paying customer. It felt surreal. But then came the real challenge, scaling. I knew that in order to take the business to the next level, I needed funding. I began pitching the idea to investors, but my lack of a formal education and my unconventional journey made me an underdog. Rejections piled up, but I didn't give up. I kept tweaking the pitch, improving the platform, and reaching out to new investors. Eventually, after a year of pitching, a small angel investor saw potential and gave us our first round of funding. With that money, we were able to hire a team and build out the platform more robustly. I expanded our marketing efforts and began focusing on creating a community of entrepreneurs who could support one another. At the same time, I put everything I had into customer service, ensuring that every person who used our platform felt heard and valued. It wasn't just about providing a service, it was about creating an experience. And that made all the difference. Fast forward a few years, and our platform became one of the leading resources for small businesses looking to import products from overseas. We expanded to new markets, scaled our team, and began offering additional services like logistics and warehousing to make the entire process even easier. By the time I turned 30, we had hit $10 million in revenue and had secured partnerships with major players in the supply chain industry. Looking back, it wasn't a smooth ride. There were plenty of times when I felt like giving up, like when we had server crashes, lost clients, or faced major cash flow issues. But the key was resilience and finding the right people to support the business. I learned that being an entrepreneur wasn't just about having the best idea, it was about executing it with passion and persistence. Today, my company is valued at over $100 million, and I get to work with some of the brightest minds in the industry. But I'll never forget the humble beginnings and the lessons I learned along the way. Success didn't come overnight, and it wasn't without sacrifice, but it was worth every single moment of struggle. So, to anyone out there who's considering taking the leap and starting their own business, my advice is simple: don't wait for the perfect moment. Start now, even if you feel like you're not ready. The learning curve is steep, and you'll hit roadblocks, but every step you take will bring you closer to your dream. And when it happens, when that moment of success finally comes, it'll be worth all the late nights, the doubts, and the failures. You've got this. I remember the first day I ever decided to become an entrepreneur like it was yesterday. It wasn't some grand moment of inspiration, but rather, it was an escape. A few years ago, I was stuck in a corporate job I hated. Every morning, I would wake up with that sinking feeling in my stomach, knowing I had to put on my game face and walk into a place that drained every ounce of my enthusiasm. The grind was soul-crushing, the office politics were unbearable, and the thought of spending another day working for someone else's dream made me feel like I was suffocating. So, I took a leap. At the time, I was a 29-year-old who had just gone through a breakup and had nothing to lose. I didn't have a grand business plan. I didn't even know what my product or service would be. I just knew I had to make a change. After months of late nights, reading about entrepreneurs on Reddit, watching motivational YouTube videos, and reading a few too many books about startups, I came up with an idea for a business. It wasn't anything revolutionary, but it was something I could start with a small budget. I decided to go into the world of e-commerce. The idea was simple. I would create a platform that helped people find affordable, eco-friendly products. It wasn't groundbreaking, but I noticed that there was a growing demand for sustainable alternatives. I had no idea how to code or design websites, but I figured I could figure it out as I went along. The first step was finding suppliers. I spent weeks contacting manufacturers, scouring the web for small businesses that aligned with my vision. I found a few, and after countless emails, I finally locked down a few suppliers willing to work with me. I took a leap and ordered a small batch of products: bamboo toothbrushes, reusable water bottles, and eco-friendly tote bags. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The next hurdle was building the website. I had no prior experience, but I figured if everyone on Reddit could teach themselves how to code, so could I. I watched tutorial after tutorial on YouTube, learned how to use Shopify, and managed to put together a decent-looking website. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. I spent hours tweaking things, making sure everything looked just right. It was my baby, and I was proud of it. I launched the website with a small marketing budget, mainly focusing on social media and a bit of paid ads. I had no idea what I was doing, but I figured I'd give it a shot. The first few weeks were slow, really slow. I barely made any sales, and my savings were dwindling. There were moments when I felt like I had made a huge mistake. I remember sitting in my apartment late at night, staring at the screen, wondering if I should just cut my losses and go back to my old job. But something kept me going. I couldn't quit, not now. Then, after about a month of almost no sales, I got my first order. It was a single bamboo toothbrush. It wasn't much, but it was enough to reignite my hope. I packed the order myself, took it to the post office, and sent it off with a sense of pride. Maybe this could work after all. I kept pushing. I started experimenting with my marketing, creating content around sustainability, sharing tips on reducing plastic waste, and engaging with eco-conscious communities online. Slowly but surely, sales started to trickle in. The first few months were tight financially, and I was living off of ramen noodles and whatever side gigs I could pick up to cover rent. But things were starting to move in the right direction. By month 6, I had built a small but loyal customer base. I was getting positive feedback, and my orders were increasing steadily. I couldn't afford to hire anyone yet, so I was doing everything myself, packing orders, handling customer service, managing the website, and running the marketing. It was exhausting, but it was also exhilarating. For the first time in years, I felt alive. I was in control of my destiny. Around the 9-month mark, I hit a significant milestone. I had made enough to quit my side gigs and go full-time with my business. It was a scary decision, but it was the right one. I reinvested everything back into the business, upgrading my website, adding new products, and experimenting with new marketing strategies. Slowly, the brand started to grow. But of course, no journey is without its challenges. There were plenty of obstacles along the way. For one, my first suppliers started to drop the ball. They were inconsistent, unreliable, and I began to receive complaints from customers about late shipments. I had to find new suppliers fast, which meant more research, more emails, and more trial and error. But in the end, I found a great group of suppliers who shared my vision and could deliver high-quality products on time. The next big challenge came when I realized I wasn't scaling fast enough. I had reached a point where my growth was plateauing, and I knew I had to make a change. After some research and a few conversations with other entrepreneurs, I decided to invest in building an email list. I spent time creating valuable content for my subscribers, offering them exclusive discounts, and building a community around my brand. It paid off. My email list grew, and sales started to pick up again. I also started experimenting with influencer marketing, partnering with eco-conscious influencers who aligned with my brand values. That brought in a new wave of customers, and I started to see exponential growth. A year into the business, I had a solid customer base, a reliable supply chain, and a growing social media following. But I still faced challenges. Cash flow was always tight, and I was constantly juggling finances, trying to reinvest into the business while keeping the lights on. But every time things got tough, I reminded myself of why I started in the first place. I wasn't doing this just to make money. I was building something that mattered. Fast forward to today, and my business has grown into a 6-figure operation. I'm not a millionaire, but I'm financially stable, and more importantly, I'm living a life that I've designed. I have a small team now, a warehouse to store inventory, and customers who are genuinely passionate about the products I sell. I'm still learning every day, but I can confidently say that I'm proud of what I've built. The journey hasn't been easy. There were times when I thought I was going to lose everything. But through perseverance, learning from my mistakes, and staying true to my values, I've managed to create something that not only sustains me, but also makes a positive impact on the world. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's that being an entrepreneur is a roller coaster ride. There are highs and lows, moments of doubt and moments of triumph. But if you stick with it, keep learning, and never give up, you might just surprise yourself. I know I did. To anyone out there thinking about taking the leap, do it. It won't be easy, but the reward of building something from scratch is worth every sleepless night. You'll face setbacks, you'll question yourself, and you'll want to quit at times. But if you keep pushing, if you stay resilient, you'll eventually see the fruits of your labor. And if I can do it, so can you. I was always the kind of person who believed in the magic of entrepreneurship. You know the story. Dream big, work hard, hustle, and one day, success will come knocking. However, the path I walked was far from a straightforward line, and it was more like a series of bends, blind spots, and detours that left me questioning whether the dream was even worth pursuing. Let me take you back to the beginning. I was in my early 20s, freshly graduated from college, and like so many others, I was excited about the future. I had a degree in marketing and, after a few months of searching, managed to land a job at a mid-sized advertising firm. At first, it felt like I was on top of the world. I had the office, the paychecks, and all the trappings that go along with adult life. But something felt off. I didn't hate the job, but it didn't light me up either. I was comfortable, but comfort wasn't going to get me where I wanted to be. I had always been that kid who tried to sell lemonade at the age of 5, then moved on to a series of side hustles throughout high school. I even convinced my parents to let me sell items on eBay when I was 16. The thrill of the transaction, the idea of building something from nothing, had always been in my blood. But here I was, at the peak of my adult career, and I felt a disconnect. One night, while sipping a beer with some friends at a local bar, the conversation shifted to businesses and side gigs. One of my friends was talking about how he'd started a small clothing brand and had been making a decent amount on the side. The idea of owning a business didn't seem as far-fetched as it once did. That conversation lit a fire in me that I couldn't shake. I decided I wanted to take the leap. The question was, what business? I spent weeks thinking about what kind of product or service I could sell. It couldn't just be any old idea. It had to be something I was passionate about, something that could turn into something real. I remembered how much I enjoyed photography when I was younger. I had an old DSLR camera gathering dust in my closet, and I thought, why not combine photography with a unique business model? So, I decided to start a photo booth rental business. In theory, it sounded like a great idea. Weddings, corporate events, birthdays. People were always looking for ways to make their events more memorable. What could be better than a portable, fun photo booth that captured all those candid moments? I dove headfirst into research, trying to figure out everything from the best equipment to the pricing models. It was a learning curve, but the idea felt right. I didn't have much capital to invest, so I knew I had to start small. I scraped together what I could and bought the equipment for a basic photo booth setup. I took some old furniture from my apartment and turned it into a makeshift office, setting up a website and social media pages. I figured I'd market it to local event planners and wedding coordinators. How hard could it be? The first few months were rough. I barely got any leads. I was still working my day job, so I tried to squeeze in networking and sales calls in between. I went to every wedding fair and event I could find, handed out flyers, and basically did everything I could think of to get my name out there. But for all the hustle, I wasn't getting the bookings I had hoped for. At the same time, I was running into all kinds of problems. The booth setup was far more complicated than I had anticipated. The software wasn't as user-friendly as I thought, and the photo prints were often too slow for the fast-paced events I was working. Worst of all, there were times when the equipment would malfunction in the middle of an event, and I'd have to scramble to fix it, risking a disaster. It was incredibly stressful, and more than once, I wondered if I should just give up and go back to my safe office job. But something kept me going. I didn't want to admit defeat, and deep down, I believed that if I could just push through, things would get better. So, I doubled down on my efforts. I took every opportunity to learn from my mistakes and improve the business. I invested in better equipment, streamlined my operations, and made sure my customer service was top-notch. I started getting positive reviews, and that word of mouth began to snowball. 6 months in, I landed my first major event, a corporate holiday party for a local tech company. It was a big deal. The client loved the setup, and my photo booth was the hit of the night. They were so happy with the service that they referred me to several other companies. From there, things slowly started to take off. I hired a couple of part-time assistants to help with the booths, and I expanded my services to offer more customization options. The business was starting to grow, and I could feel the momentum building. But with success came new challenges. As my business expanded, I quickly realized that managing everything myself was unsustainable. I had to learn how to delegate, build a team, and set clear processes in place. For the first time, I had to act as a real CEO. I had to make tough decisions about pricing, marketing, and even which events to take on. At one point, I had to turn down a large booking because I didn't have the resources to handle it properly. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was a crucial moment of growth. Eventually, I found my stride. The business was no longer just a side hustle. It was becoming my full-time career. I made the decision to leave my job and focus on scaling the photo booth business. The transition was scary, but it felt right. Over the next few years, I expanded my offerings to include video booths, 360-degree photo booths, and custom backdrops. I even started franchising the business in other cities. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. The business that once started as a small idea fueled by passion and a little bit of blind optimism has now become a multi-location operation with a loyal customer base. I've learned more about business, leadership, and perseverance than I could have ever imagined. I'm proud of what I've built, but I'm also aware that it didn't happen overnight. It took grit, flexibility, and an endless amount of learning to get here. So, if you're thinking about starting your own business or pursuing your dreams, take it from me. It's not going to be easy. There will be failures, setbacks, and moments when you question if it's all worth it. But if you keep going, if you learn from each misstep and adjust, you'll find a way. Trust in yourself, keep the vision clear, and remember that success rarely comes without struggle. You just have to keep moving forward. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I started my journey in the world of entrepreneurship back in my early 20s, a time when everyone around me seemed to have their lives all figured out. While my friends were heading into traditional 9-to-5 jobs, I was sitting at home with a crazy idea in my head and an even crazier belief that I could make it work. It all started when I realized that something I loved doing as a hobby, graphic design, could be more than just a side hustle. I had always been the go-to person in my friend group for designing logos, posters, and the occasional meme. Eventually, I began to think, why not turn this into a business? So, I started freelancing. At first, it was slow, really slow. I wasn't getting a lot of traction and I had to constantly chase after clients. But I stuck with it, and after a while, things began to pick up. However, I quickly learned that being a freelancer wasn't the dream I thought it would be. I was spending all my time hustling for clients, managing invoicing, and dealing with the back end of the business. I had no time for actual creative work, which was the whole reason I got into design in the first place. I needed a change. One day, I had an idea. Instead of just being a one-man show, what if I could build a small agency? An agency that would focus not just on graphic design, but on full-fledged branding and marketing services. The plan was to hire people who were experts in different areas, from SEO specialists to copywriters, web developers, and social media managers. The goal was to give clients an all-in-one solution. But there was a major roadblock. I had no money. I had saved up a bit from freelancing, but it was far from enough to hire a team, rent office space, or even buy decent software. So, I did what anyone with no money and big dreams would do. I got creative. I started by reaching out to other freelancers in my network and proposed a partnership. They could work with me on a revenue-sharing model, meaning they wouldn't get paid unless we landed a client. It wasn't the most attractive offer, but it was all I could offer at the time. Surprisingly, a few people were on board. A web developer, a writer, and a marketing strategist all joined the team, and we began offering services to potential clients. Our first major client came from a random cold email I sent to a small startup. I had no experience in the industry they were in, but I was determined. I created a personalized pitch, showed them some mock designs, and highlighted how our full-service approach could help their business grow. To my amazement, they loved the proposal and signed on. It was a small contract, but it was a foot in the door. From that point, we were off and running. We worked tirelessly to deliver an exceptional product for our first client, even working late into the night to meet deadlines. The effort paid off. They loved our work, and word of mouth started to spread. Slowly but surely, more clients started coming to us. I took on the role of client management while the rest of the team handled the creative work. However, as the business grew, so did the challenges. Managing clients became more complex. We started hiring more people, and suddenly, I was not just a designer or a business owner. I was a manager, dealing with all the headaches that came with leading a team. I had to learn how to handle conflicts, set clear expectations, and ensure that everyone was on the same page. In the beginning, I was too focused on growth and not enough on creating a positive, sustainable work environment. A pivotal moment in my journey came during our third year of business. I had grown frustrated with the constant juggling of roles, from HR to marketing, sales to accounting. The business had become more of a burden than a passion. That's when I decided to bring in a business coach. The coach helped me see that the way I had been managing the business wasn't sustainable. I was stuck in a cycle of reacting to problems instead of proactively addressing them. We worked on creating better systems for the business, automating parts of the process, improving communication, and setting clearer goals for both the business and the team. I started stepping back and giving my employees more autonomy, which ultimately led to a more efficient and happier work environment. During this time, we also focused heavily on scaling. One of the decisions that paid off in the long run was implementing a content marketing strategy. We began creating blog posts, case studies, and social media content to showcase our work. This not only helped us attract more clients, but also positioned us as an authority in the branding space. Our reputation grew, and soon we were working with larger companies and securing contracts worth six figures. But just as things seemed to be taking off, the COVID-19 pandemic hit. In the blink of an eye, everything came to a screeching halt. Clients started canceling contracts, and the ones who remained cut their budgets drastically. I went from managing a growing team to worrying about layoffs and how to keep the business afloat. The uncertainty was terrifying, but I knew I had to act fast. I took a hard look at our expenses and started cutting back wherever I could. We moved to remote work, eliminated unnecessary software subscriptions, and renegotiated contracts with vendors. It wasn't easy, and it was painful, but we managed to survive. During this time, I also shifted our focus. Instead of chasing clients in traditional industries, I started targeting businesses that were thriving in the pandemic, like e-commerce stores, online education platforms, and healthcare companies. This pivot was exactly what we needed. As businesses started moving online, demand for digital marketing and branding services surged. Our ability to help companies transition from brick-and-mortar to online operations was invaluable. It wasn't long before we were back to pre-pandemic levels of revenue, and then some. 5 years into the business, I was finally able to take a step back and reflect on everything we had accomplished. We had grown from a tiny freelance operation into a full-fledged agency with a team of over 20 people. More importantly, I had learned the most valuable lesson of all. Entrepreneurship is a constant balancing act between growth, resilience, and adaptability. It's about being willing to take risks, but also being smart enough to change direction when things aren't working. As I look to the future, I'm more excited than ever. There are always new challenges ahead, and as a business owner, I know that I have to keep evolving. The road hasn't been easy, but every single hurdle has made me stronger and more capable. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that entrepreneurship is less about having a perfect plan and more about being able to adapt, learn, and keep going no matter what. If I can do it, anyone can. I always dreamed of being my own boss. Growing up, I watched my father, a small-town mechanic, struggle to make ends meet while fixing cars in the garage behind our house. He worked tirelessly, fixing everyone else's problems, but never had time to fix his own. I swore I'd do things differently. I wasn't going to be chained to the back of a car garage for the rest of my life. I decided to go to college for business management, even though my parents didn't really understand why. They thought I'd follow in my dad's footsteps, taking over the family business. But I wanted to build something bigger, something I could truly call my own. I didn't want to spend my days repairing broken engines. I wanted to fix people's problems in a way that allowed me to scale and grow. After college, I found myself working for a large marketing agency. The work wasn't terrible. The pay was decent, and the experience was invaluable, but I felt trapped. The more I learned, the more I realized I didn't belong there. I was drowning in bureaucracy and red tape. Creativity was stifled, and I was spending my days pushing papers around and attending endless meetings. The dream of running my own business seemed further away than ever. One day, after yet another soul-sucking meeting with a client who didn't understand their own brand, I had enough. I quit my job, packed my things, and moved back in with my parents. They were, of course, furious. "What are you thinking? You can't just throw away a stable job," my dad said. But I knew deep down that if I didn't take this leap now, I never would. For months, I struggled. I didn't know what I was doing. I just had this vague idea that I wanted to start my own business, but no clear direction. I spent countless hours reading books, watching YouTube videos, and talking to anyone I could find who had successfully started their own business. At first, it was just me alone in my parents' basement, working on ideas that seemed too crazy to actually pursue. Then one night, I stumbled across an article about a guy who had made millions by starting an online store that sold niche products. It wasn't the idea that inspired me, it was the fact that he had turned his passion into a business. He wasn't trying to be the next Amazon. He just found a small but loyal customer base and built something they loved. I thought about my own life and what I was passionate about. I'd always been into fitness, but I'd never really thought about how to turn it into a business. I started researching the fitness market, analyzing trends, and seeing what people were buying. It became clear that there was a gap in the market for high-quality, sustainable fitness gear. The more I looked, the more I saw an opportunity. It wasn't an easy decision, but I decided to take the plunge. I took the money I had saved from my old job and invested in a small inventory of eco-friendly workout gear, yoga mats, resistance bands, dumbbells, all made from sustainable materials. It was a niche, but I thought there was potential. Building the website was the first real step. I spent weeks learning about e-commerce, designing my site, and figuring out how to make it look professional without spending a fortune. I also had to learn about shipping, customer service, and how to make sure my products would actually arrive in one piece. I was running everything myself. Every order, every email, every return. It was exhausting, but I was determined to make it work. The first few months were rough. Sales were slow, and I constantly questioned my decision. Was this all just a pipe dream? I remember sitting at my computer one night, looking at the analytics of my website. I had made a total of $45 that week. That was it. I spent more on Facebook ads than I had made from sales. I felt like I was throwing money into a black hole, but I kept pushing forward. I started experimenting with different marketing strategies. I focused on building a presence on Instagram and TikTok, sharing workout tips and featuring my products in videos. I collaborated with fitness influencers who had a small but dedicated following. Slowly but surely, the orders started coming in. I was making sales, and more importantly, I was building a community of people who believed in what I was doing. One day, I woke up to an email from a customer who said she loved the resistance bands she had purchased and wanted to know if I had any more products to offer. It was such a small thing, but it felt like a huge win. Someone was genuinely interested in what I was doing. That was the spark I needed to keep going. I continued refining my product offerings, expanding my line of sustainable fitness gear, and improving my website's user experience. The more I worked on it, the more I saw the potential for growth. Eventually, I was able to bring on a few employees to help with customer service and operations, freeing up my time to focus on marketing and expanding the brand. Fast forward 3 years, and my business is thriving. We're now a team of 20 people, and our products are sold worldwide. The company has evolved from a one-person operation into a full-fledged brand, with our own line of apparel, accessories, and a thriving community of loyal customers. We've made a name for ourselves in the fitness industry, and I'm proud of what we've built. I never imagined that quitting my stable job and moving back in with my parents would lead me here. It's been a journey filled with failure, doubt, and hard lessons. But the one thing I learned is that if you're passionate about something and are willing to put in the work, you can make it happen. It's never easy, but if you keep pushing, you'll eventually break through. I still remember the day I made my first sale. It was a $15 yoga mat. But to me, it felt like $1 million. It was the moment I knew I was on the right path. That moment, I realized I wasn't just building a business. I was building a life I was proud of. To anyone out there thinking about starting their own business, just go for it. Don't let the fear of failure hold you back. You'll face obstacles, and you'll have moments of doubt. But if you keep pushing through and keep learning, you'll find a way to succeed. It's not about having the perfect idea from the start. It's about taking that first step and staying committed. The road may be long, but the destination is worth it. I was 22, fresh out of college, with big dreams and an even bigger mountain of student debt. I didn't have the luxury of coming from a wealthy family, so there was no financial cushion waiting for me. I had always been entrepreneurial, doing odd jobs from a young age, mowing lawns, washing cars, running small errands for neighbors, but I never thought I'd actually start a business. I was just trying to survive. At that point in my life, I was stuck in a corporate job that made my stomach turn every morning. I knew I couldn't do it forever, but I wasn't sure where to begin. That's when I stumbled upon a gap in the market during a conversation with a friend. We were talking about side hustles, and he mentioned something that I couldn't shake off. People were always asking him where he bought his clothes, as they loved his style but didn't know where to shop for affordable yet trendy options. That sparked something in me. It wasn't a light bulb moment like you might expect. No, it was more like a slow-burning ember that turned into an all-consuming fire. I decided to turn the idea of offering stylish, budget-friendly clothing into my first business venture. It sounded so simple at the time: find the suppliers, create a website, sell the clothes. Easy, right? I started by doing hours of research. I didn't have any formal business training, so I relied on blogs, forums, and YouTube videos to understand the ins and outs of dropshipping. I was terrified at first, terrified that I'd fail, terrified that people wouldn't buy, and terrified that I'd waste all my savings. But I figured that if I didn't take the leap now, I'd always wonder, what if? I scraped together a couple $1,000s, the last bit of money I had saved from my job, and invested in setting up an online store. The website was basic. I didn't even have a professional design at first. It was just a functional platform where I could showcase the clothes I sourced from suppliers. I didn't have a huge inventory. In fact, I only had a handful of items because I didn't have the cash flow to buy bulk inventory. I was going for the sell-first, buy later approach that dropshipping allows. I also had no marketing strategy. I didn't know about Facebook ads or Google Analytics, so I used my personal social media accounts to promote the store. I remember posting a picture of the clothes on Instagram, trying to get friends to buy from me, but sales were almost non-existent. My first few weeks were a disaster. I barely made any money, and I felt like I was throwing everything into a black hole. But I kept pushing forward, even though I had no idea what I was doing. Then came the breakthrough. I had a friend who worked in digital marketing, and after a few months of me toiling away without success, he offered to help me out for free. It was the first bit of good luck I had gotten in months. He helped me with setting up Facebook ads, targeting the right audience, and using influencers to get the word out. He also introduced me to the concept of email marketing and how it could drive repeat customers. With his help, things started to pick up. Slowly at first, then faster as I learned how to use the analytics tools, adjust my ads, and get the right products in front of the right people. It wasn't a straight path. There were plenty of days where I felt like giving up, but each small win kept me going. A $50 sale turned into a $100 sale, and soon I was getting consistent orders. The rush of receiving my first big order felt like I had won the lottery. I could barely believe that someone, a complete stranger, trusted me enough to spend money on my products. But just as things were starting to take off, disaster struck. One of my suppliers had a massive delay in their shipping, and customers started complaining. My first negative reviews came in, and I panicked. I was still learning how to manage customer service, and dealing with complaints was something I had never prepared for. There were moments when I thought I might lose everything, but I realized that this was part of the process. I had to take responsibility for the situation, and instead of running away from it, I leaned into it. I offered refunds, extended discounts, and worked overtime to improve my supplier relationships. My customers, for the most part, appreciated my honesty and transparency. Slowly, the negative reviews turned into positive ones as I kept improving the business and customer service. I had learned a very hard lesson, but it made me a better entrepreneur. As the months went by, I expanded my product range, hired a few freelancers to handle customer support, and began building a brand. I rebranded my website, hired a professional designer, and even started creating my own clothing line. I began investing in better marketing strategies and targeted advertising, and the business grew exponentially. I was able to pay off my student debt within 2 years. Now, looking back at it, I can't believe how far I've come. From a broke 22-year-old with zero business experience to running a six-figure business, it's been an insane ride. I learned a lot the hard way, through mistakes, failures, and countless sleepless nights, but every single moment was worth it. The key was to never give up, even when things felt like they were falling apart. Every failure was a lesson, and every lesson was a step closer to success. The biggest piece of advice I can give anyone thinking of starting a business is this: you won't have all the answers in the beginning, and that's okay. You'll make mistakes, and you'll get knocked down. But if you're willing to learn from those mistakes, put in the hard work, and keep pushing, you'll be amazed at how far you can go. To this day, I still think about how different my life could have been if I hadn't taken that first leap into entrepreneurship. I still don't have it all figured out, but I'm in a much better place than I ever thought possible. And most importantly, I'm no longer stuck in a job I hate. That, in itself, is the biggest victory of all. If you're stuck in a situation where you feel like you're spinning your wheels, or if you're considering starting a business but don't know where to begin, just take the first step. You don't need to have everything figured out at the start. You just need the courage to take that first step. The rest will come. I've been running my own business for almost 5 years now, and I'm finally in a place where I can look back and breathe a sigh of relief. My journey wasn't smooth by any means, and it wasn't the kind of overnight success that people often fantasize about. But through trial, error, and a lot of persistence, I made it work. This is my story. It all started when I graduated from college. I was the typical overachiever, good grades, president of the student association, a couple of internships under my belt, but I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I thought I'd work at a big company for a few years, gain experience, then figure out my next steps. I quickly realized that working in a corporate environment wasn't for me. I was hired at a large tech firm right after graduation, and on paper, it was the dream job. The salary was decent, the perks were great, and the office had all the amenities you could imagine. But something was off. I felt disconnected from the work I was doing, like I was just another cog in the machine. Every day, I would go through the motions, but my mind would wander to ideas for products and services I thought could do better than what the company offered. It wasn't a revolutionary idea, but I wanted to try something of my own. After 6 months, I realized that the corporate life was sucking the soul out of me. It wasn't just the work, it was the monotony, the lack of creative freedom, and the way I felt like I was just contributing to someone else's dream. I began to fantasize about starting my own company, but the thought terrified me. I had no experience in entrepreneurship, no savings, and no clear idea of where to start. The idea of quitting my stable job to chase an uncertain dream seemed reckless. One day, after a particularly frustrating meeting with my boss, I reached a breaking point. I left the office early, drove to a local coffee shop, and sat down with my laptop to start researching business ideas. I knew I wanted to create something in the tech space, but I had no idea what. I spent hours just reading, brainstorming, and trying to come up with a viable idea. After days of research, it hit me. Why not create an app that could help people streamline their daily routines? I had noticed that most productivity apps were either too complicated or too basic. There was nothing that truly helped people balance their work, personal lives, and health in a simple, integrated way. I wanted to build an app that would provide a dashboard of all your tasks, appointments, and even health metrics all in one place. It seemed like a simple idea, but I was excited about it. The next step was figuring out how to actually build the app. I had no background in app development, so I started learning as much as I could through online courses and tutorials. I remember sitting in my tiny apartment at 2 a.m., watching coding videos on YouTube and feeling a sense of dread mixed with excitement. Every time I thought I had learned enough to move forward, I'd hit another roadblock. I didn't have a technical co-founder, and I wasn't sure how to hire developers. But I was determined. I spent the next few months learning to code, but more importantly, I spent time networking. I reached out to developers on forums, tried to get advice from people who had built apps before, and even attended a few startup meetups. One night, after several months of trying to make something out of nothing, I met a developer at one of those events who seemed genuinely interested in the project. His name was Dave, and he was a freelance developer who had built apps for a few startups in the past. We exchanged ideas, and it turned out he was looking for his next project. The timing was perfect. Dave agreed to work on the app with me for a small equity share, and we quickly started collaborating on the design and development. It wasn't easy. We hit a lot of bumps along the way. The first version of the app was a disaster. It was slow, clunky, and full of bugs. But we kept pushing, kept iterating. Every time we fixed one problem, another one would pop up. But I refused to give up. Around this time, I realized I couldn't do everything on my own. I needed to learn how to sell the product, how to market it, and how to raise money to keep the company going. I started pitching my idea to potential investors. Most of them turned me down, often because I didn't have a track record. But I didn't let it discourage me. I kept working on the app, and by the time we had a functional prototype, I had built enough of a network that I could finally secure a small investment from an angel investor who believed in the idea. With that initial funding, we launched the app in a beta version to a small group of users. It was a huge moment for me. I had a product, it was out in the world, and people were using it. But the launch wasn't the fairy tale moment I'd imagined. The feedback was mostly mixed. Some users loved it, others hated it, and a lot of them didn't understand how it worked. I spent hours reading user reviews, analyzing what was wrong, and figuring out how to make the app better. By the time we launched the official version of the app, we had made so many changes and fixes that it felt like an entirely different product. But the real breakthrough came when we managed to secure a partnership with a well-known productivity website. They featured our app in an article, and overnight, downloads spiked. It was the kind of moment I'd dreamed about for months. But success didn't come without its challenges. We faced intense competition from bigger players in the productivity space, and there were many times I felt like throwing in the towel. The pressure was immense. But each time I wanted to quit, I reminded myself why I started. I had built something from nothing, and now it was up to me to make it work. 5 years later, the app is thriving. We've expanded our features, raised additional funding, and hired a small team. I've learned more in these 5 years than I could have ever imagined. The financial struggles are far from over, but I'm no longer living paycheck to paycheck. More importantly, I've found a sense of purpose in what I do every day. The road to entrepreneurship is never linear. There were countless sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and financial strain. But if you stick with it, and if you surround yourself with people who believe in your vision, it's possible to turn your dreams into a reality. My advice to anyone thinking about starting a business is simple. Don't wait for the perfect moment. It will never come. Start where you are, use the resources you have, and be prepared to learn along the way. And most importantly, don't give up. You never know how close you are to success when you're ready to quit. I started my first business when I was 23 years old. I had no idea what I was doing. Looking back now, it's almost embarrassing to think about how naive and unprepared I was. But that's the thing about starting out. No one is truly ready. You just dive in and hope you figure it out as you go. And somehow, I did. I had just graduated college with a degree in marketing. I had a solid GPA, but I didn't want to go down the traditional path of working for someone else. The idea of being stuck in a cubicle, reporting to a boss, and working 9 to 5 for the rest of my life just didn't sit well with me. I was hungry for something more, something that would allow me to control my destiny. So, I started thinking. I had always been obsessed with sneakers. It wasn't just about the style or the latest trends, it was about the culture. I loved how sneakers had their own language, their own world. I spent hours researching rare releases, limited edition drops, and the secondary market where people resold sneakers at ridiculous prices. One day, it hit me. I could build a business around it. I could create an online store dedicated to sneaker culture, but with a twist. I would offer custom designs and exclusive collaborations with local artists. At the time, I had no idea how to design a website, no business experience, and not nearly enough capital to launch a full-fledged operation. But I had an idea, and that's where it all started. I used my last few $1,000s from my graduation gift to register a domain name, create a website, and start sourcing sneakers. I found local suppliers who were willing to sell me limited edition sneakers at a wholesale price, and I began working with freelance designers to come up with unique customizations. My goal was to create a niche market, sneakers that you couldn't find anywhere else. The more I learned about the sneaker community, the more I realized how important exclusivity was to them. So that became my selling point. My business wasn't going to be just another online sneaker store. It was going to be a place where sneakerheads could find something truly special. I built the website on Shopify, using one of their free themes. I spent hours watching YouTube tutorials on how to optimize my store and make it look professional. The first time I launched the website, I was so nervous. I remember telling myself, if I get one sale, just one, I'll consider this a success. Days went by with no sales. I wasn't even getting traffic. I felt like I had wasted my money and time. I knew I needed to do something to get noticed. So, I turned to social media. I created Instagram and Twitter accounts, started following everyone in the sneaker community, and reached out to influencers. At first, no one cared. I was just another guy trying to sell sneakers online. But I kept pushing, posting daily, and trying to engage with people. Slowly, my account started to grow. I remember when I hit 100 followers on Instagram, it felt like a huge milestone. But it was still just the beginning. The breakthrough came when I reached out to a small but influential sneaker blogger who had a decent following. He agreed to review one of my custom-designed sneakers in exchange for a free pair. His review was glowing, and to my surprise, it drove a ton of traffic to my website. The first sale came soon after that. I'll never forget the feeling of hearing that notification chime on my phone. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. From there, the business started to grow slowly but steadily. I reinvested every penny into new inventory, marketing, and collaborations. But even though things were moving in the right direction, it wasn't all smooth sailing. About a year into the business, I hit a major roadblock. I had scaled up my operations and was getting orders from all over the country. But I wasn't prepared for the logistics side of things. I had to handle shipping, inventory management, and customer service on my own. It became overwhelming, and mistakes started happening. Orders were delayed, people were complaining, and returns started piling up. I had to make a tough decision. I could either keep struggling on my own and risk damaging my brand, or I could find help. So, I hired a fulfillment service to handle the shipping, and I brought on a part-time customer service representative. This freed up my time to focus on marketing, content creation, and scaling the business even further. However, as the business grew, so did the competition. More and more online sneaker stores were popping up, and I was no longer operating in a niche market. I had to find a way to differentiate myself. I decided to take a risk. I partnered with a well-known sneaker artist to create an exclusive collection of custom sneakers. These sneakers were priced higher than anything I had sold before, but I believed in the quality and exclusivity. I launched the collection with a massive marketing campaign, using influencer partnerships, Instagram ads, and a limited-time offer to create urgency. The collection sold out in less than 48 hours. That was the moment I realized that I had finally hit my stride. The brand was no longer just a passion project, it was a legitimate business with a loyal following. As the years went on, I continued to innovate and push boundaries. I added new product lines, expanded my online presence, and opened pop-up shops in major cities. The business continued to grow, and I was able to bring on a team of talented people who shared my vision. But success didn't come without its challenges. There were constant changes in the sneaker market, supply chain disruptions, and the ever-present pressure of keeping up with trends. I had to stay flexible, adapt to changing consumer behavior, and constantly evaluate what was working and what wasn't. Today, my business is one of the leading online destinations for custom and exclusive sneakers. We've been featured in major publications, and I've had the privilege of collaborating with some of the most respected names in the sneaker world. It's been an incredible journey, one that's taught me more than I could have imagined. Looking back, I can't help but think about how far I've come, from a broke college graduate with a dream to running a multi-million-dollar business. I often get asked if I ever imagined things turning out this way, and the honest answer is no. But I always believed in myself, even when things looked bleak. And that's what kept me going. Entrepreneurship is not glamorous. It's messy, exhausting, and full of failures. But for me, it's been the most rewarding thing I've ever done. And if you're out there thinking about starting your own business, take this as a sign. You're never truly ready, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't start. If you're passionate, willing to learn, and have the drive to push through the tough times, anything is possible. I had never imagined that I would be in a position to tell this story, but here I am, writing it for people like me who just want to hear someone else's experience and maybe get some hope. This is the story of how I went from a broke, unsure 23-year-old to running a successful tech startup in just 4 years. I'm not trying to say I've made it, but I've learned so much that I feel I owe it to others to share. So, let's go back to the beginning. I was 23, fresh out of college, and living in a cramped apartment in the city. I had studied engineering, but deep down, I knew I didn't want to work in a corporate job, climbing the corporate ladder. I didn't fit in with the idea of 9-to-5 life. I was a creative, and I'd always been fascinated by technology and startups. I remember reading stories of founders who were still in their 20s, building companies from their basements or garages. It felt surreal, but it was also inspiring. I couldn't help but think, why can't that be me? But the reality was, I was struggling. I had student loans that felt like a mountain I'd never climb, and I was working part-time jobs just to make ends meet. I didn't have any savings, and my family couldn't help me financially. I was constantly overwhelmed by the idea of doing something big, but had no real clue where to start. I didn't have a network, I wasn't a genius coder, and I didn't have any big investors backing me up. One night, after a particularly rough day where I felt like I was getting nowhere, I sat down in front of my laptop and just started thinking. I asked myself, what could I do that would be both meaningful and possibly scalable? That's when it hit me. I had been tinkering with various small coding projects for years, just for fun. I'd built a couple of apps for personal use and played around with some open source projects, but nothing serious. I realized I could combine my engineering background with my passion for tech, and that maybe, just maybe, I could build something people would actually pay for. It started with a problem I had faced myself. I hated the fact that every time I bought something online, I had to go through multiple pages, entering my credit card info, shipping address, and personal details. It was so tedious, and I often abandoned purchases because of it. Then I thought, what if there was an easier way? And that's how the idea for my first startup came into being. A secure, one-click checkout system that would integrate with major e-commerce platforms to make shopping faster, simpler, and safer. At first, I was scared. I didn't know anything about running a business, and I definitely didn't have experience in the payments industry. But I decided to take the plunge. I spent the next few weeks building a prototype. It wasn't pretty at first, and it definitely wasn't polished. But it worked. It was a simple button that customers could click to automatically save their shipping and payment details for future purchases. The next step was to test it out. I knew the first hurdle would be getting people to use it. So, I reached out to a few e-commerce site owners I knew, mostly from online forums and social media, and asked if they'd be willing to give my prototype a try. At first, most of them said no. They were skeptical, they didn't know me, and they weren't about to change their checkout process for something untested. But I kept pushing. I kept refining the product, kept improving it, and kept explaining the benefits. Eventually, one small online store owner agreed to test it. And to my surprise, it worked. The checkout conversion rate for that store shot up by 30%. The owner was thrilled, and from there, word of mouth started spreading. But success didn't come overnight. For every small win, there were dozens of failures. I had to constantly tweak the software, learn new things, and deal with technical issues I wasn't prepared for. I had no funding, no mentor, and no team. It was just me in my apartment, working late into the night, Googling solutions to every problem that came up. Eventually, I realized that I couldn't keep doing everything on my own. If I wanted to grow, I needed to hire people, even if I didn't have the money to pay them what they were worth. I found 2 developers who were passionate about the project and believed in the idea. They agreed to work for a small salary and a piece of equity. I promised them that once we secured funding, I'd make sure they were compensated fairly. Looking back, I can't believe they trusted me, but they did, and together, we were able to turn the product into something scalable. Over the next year, we continued to refine the product, iron out bugs, and most importantly, build relationships with e-commerce platforms. We integrated with Shopify, WooCommerce, and BigCommerce, and that's when things really started to take off. We went from a handful of users to thousands. The growth was slow, but it was steady. Now came the tricky part, funding. I had never raised money before, and I didn't know anyone in venture capital. But I didn't let that stop me. I spent hours researching how to pitch investors, and I wrote a pitch deck that I believed in. I reached out to investors I thought might be interested in what we were doing. To my surprise, a few were willing to meet. I pitched to dozens of VCs, and while many turned me down, I finally found an investor who saw potential in my vision. They agreed to a small seed round, and with that money, I was able to build out the product and hire more people. The next year was a whirlwind. We grew faster than I ever expected, and my small team started to feel more like a real company. I had to learn how to be a CEO, how to manage people, how to deal with the stress, and how to keep everything together. It wasn't easy, and there were definitely moments when I thought about giving up. But every time I thought about quitting, I reminded myself of that little voice inside me when I was 23, when I had nothing but a broken laptop and an idea. Now, at 27, my company has expanded into a full-fledged payments platform. We've raised additional rounds of funding, and I've hired an incredible team that is passionate about our mission. I'm not a billionaire, but I've built something that makes a difference. More importantly, I've built something that I believe in. I've gone from a broke college graduate to the founder of a company that is starting to make waves in the tech world. Looking back, the road was anything but smooth. It's been filled with sleepless nights, endless stress, and more mistakes than I care to count. But every setback was a lesson, and every failure was a stepping stone. I've learned that if you keep pushing forward, no matter how many times you fail, it's possible to create something real. If I can do it, so can you. Just keep going, even when it feels like you're stuck. The breakthrough might be closer than you think. And so, here I am, still figuring it out, still learning, but proud of how far we've come. If you're reading this and you're in the early stages of your own journey, remember that success isn't a straight line. It's a lot of ups and downs, but persistence is everything. Don't give up, and keep pushing through the rough patches. It's worth it in the end. This is a story about how I turned a small idea into a six-figure business, all while dealing with self-doubt, imposter syndrome, and a lot of sleepless nights. It's the journey of how I started from nothing but an idea and built it into something that now supports my family and gives me a sense of purpose. Maybe it'll resonate with someone out there who's stuck or unsure whether they should take the leap. It all began in 2018 when I was working a 9-to-5 job in a corporate office. I was a project manager, doing what I was told, going through the motions, and collecting a steady paycheck. But deep down, I hated it. Every day felt like a grind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant for something more. The thing was, I had no idea what that something more was. All I knew was that I was tired of trading my time for money and working to help someone else build their dream while mine was left to rot in the back of my mind. I'd always been interested in fitness, and I spent my free time working out, learning about nutrition, and reading fitness blogs. One day, I came across an article about online coaching, specifically fitness coaching, and it was like a light bulb went off in my head. I realized that I could combine my passion for fitness with my skills in project management. The idea was simple: create a business that helps people achieve their fitness goals while allowing me to work for myself and, eventually, be my own boss. At first, I wasn't sure where to start. I had no formal training in fitness, and the thought of competing with well-established coaches made me anxious. But then I thought about how many people are out there who are just like me, trying to get fit but struggling to find someone who understands their needs. That's where I could come in. I wasn't aiming to be the next Arnold Schwarzenegger or even the next Instagram fitness influencer. I just wanted to offer realistic, sustainable fitness coaching for people who had no time for fancy gym routines or extreme diets. So, I did what any overwhelmed person would do. I Googled everything. I spent countless hours researching certifications, business models, and marketing strategies. I enrolled in an online personal training certification program and completed it in about 3 months while still working my full-time job. During this time, I also started building my website and social media presence. At first, I just posted about my own fitness journey, hoping that someone would find my content useful. My following was slow to grow, but I didn't mind. I knew it would take time. Around 6 months into the process, I was finally ready to launch my online coaching business. I had a website with a basic landing page, a simple email list, and a few social media posts. I started reaching out to people I knew, friends, family, coworkers, anyone who might be interested in my coaching services. To be honest, I didn't expect much at first. I figured it would take a while to get clients, especially since I was a nobody in the fitness space. But then, one day, a friend from work reached out to me and asked if I could help him lose weight. I gave him a 12-week program for free, just to get a testimonial and some experience under my belt. A few weeks later, he came back, telling me he lost 15 pounds and was feeling great. That was my first big win, and it gave me the confidence I needed to push forward. From there, things started to snowball, slowly but surely. I began offering paid coaching services, and my first paying client was a guy I met at a local coffee shop. I'll never forget the moment he told me he was willing to pay me $150 for a month of coaching. It wasn't much, but it felt like a massive victory. After that, I kept pushing forward, refining my systems, learning from my mistakes, and always putting in the work. I began growing my client base through word of mouth, social media, and email marketing. I also invested in paid advertising to help generate leads. Slowly but surely, the business began to grow. But let me tell you, there were plenty of challenges along the way. The first few months were full of self-doubt. I questioned whether I was good enough to be a coach. After all, I wasn't a professional athlete or a celebrity trainer, so who was I to tell someone how to get fit? But then I remembered why I started this journey in the first place. I didn't want to just be another fitness influencer or someone who flexes on Instagram. I wanted to help real people with real struggles. That mentality kept me grounded. As the business grew, I faced even more challenges. My full-time job was demanding, and I had to balance it with my growing coaching business. There were days when I didn't sleep, working late into the night to respond to client emails, create workout plans, and market my business. But I kept pushing forward, telling myself that the pain was temporary and that the payoff would be worth it. Eventually, I reached a tipping point where my business was making enough money to replace my full-time income. That was a game changer. I left my corporate job in 2020 and have never looked back. I went from struggling to make ends meet while working for someone else to being my own boss, setting my own schedule, and doing work that I genuinely love. Fast forward to today, and my business is thriving. I've helped hundreds of clients reach their fitness goals, and I've even built a small team of coaches who help me manage the workload. I'm now making six figures annually, and I get to work from home, which gives me the freedom to spend more time with my family. It hasn't been easy, and there were times when I felt like giving up. But looking back, I'm so glad I stuck with it. Now, I spend a lot of time coaching other aspiring fitness coaches. I've created online courses and resources to help others build their own coaching businesses. The thing that excites me the most is seeing other people succeed because I know how much work and effort it takes to get there. And if I can help even one person avoid the mistakes I made along the way, then I feel like I'm truly giving back. To anyone reading this who feels stuck or unsure whether they should take the leap into entrepreneurship, I'd say this: it's not going to be easy, and it's going to take a lot of hard work, but it is possible. You don't need to have all the answers at the start. You just need to start. The rest will follow. There will be times when you feel like you're not good enough or that it's not worth it. But trust me, it is. Stay persistent, stay humble, and most importantly, stay consistent. The journey might be long, but it's worth every step. And if I can do it, so can you. I remember the first time I realized that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was sitting at my desk in a corporate office, mindlessly scrolling through emails, watching the minutes crawl by as I waited for the workday to end. It was a typical Monday. The kind of Monday where the work feels like a never-ending loop of tedium. I was working as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm, and while the pay was decent, the work wasn't fulfilling. It didn't ignite any passion in me. Sure, there were a few moments where I felt like I was making an impact, but most of the time, I felt like a cog in a machine, easily replaceable and unnoticed. The dream of entrepreneurship always seemed distant, like a mountain I'd never be able to climb. Then, one morning, something changed. I was sitting in a meeting, discussing some new campaign we were rolling out, when it hit me. Why was I pouring so much of my energy into helping someone else build their dream, while I wasn't doing anything to build my own? That moment of clarity was like a jolt to the system. It was as if all the frustration and dissatisfaction of the past years suddenly converged into a single thought: if I don't take control of my own future now, when will I? I didn't quit my job that day, though. That would have been too impulsive and irresponsible, but it sparked a series of actions that would eventually lead me to the path of entrepreneurship. The next few months were filled with research, planning, and a lot of late nights. I spent hours reading books, listening to podcasts, and consuming anything related to entrepreneurship and business. I started to understand that success wasn't about having a breakthrough idea, but about executing relentlessly on what you already have. In the beginning, I had no idea what business I wanted to start. It felt like there were so many options, and yet none of them felt right. Should I start an online store? A service-based business? Maybe something related to my marketing background? I remember one evening, my frustration boiling over. I was sitting at my kitchen table, trying to brainstorm, when my phone rang. It was my old college friend, Sarah, who I hadn't spoken to in ages. We caught up for a bit, and when I told her about my entrepreneurial ambitions, she laughed and said, "Well, you're good at marketing. Have you thought about helping other small businesses with that?" It was like a light bulb went off. She was right. I had been working in marketing for years, and I had helped numerous companies with their campaigns, brand strategies, and customer acquisition. Maybe I could build a business around helping small businesses improve their marketing. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. I took a deep breath and quit my job 2 months later. I didn't have a clear business plan or a product to sell, but I was ready to take the leap. I was fortunate to have saved up enough to sustain myself for a while, and I had some connections in the marketing world that could help me get started. I rented a tiny office space, which was a stretch financially, but I felt like I needed that physical separation from home to establish myself as a business owner. The first few months were brutal. I had no clients, no steady income, and I was barely getting by. I spent my days hustling to build a client base, reaching out to local small businesses, offering free consultations, and writing cold emails. Rejection after rejection hit me harder than I anticipated, and there were many nights when I questioned whether I'd made a huge mistake. There were times when I thought about going back to my old job, but I reminded myself that I had chosen this path for a reason. One day, after what felt like months of trying and failing, I finally landed my first paying client. They were a local boutique that needed help with their social media and branding. The deal wasn't big, but it was a start. I worked around the clock on their campaign, pouring every ounce of energy into making sure they saw results. I wanted to prove that I could do this. That first success snowballed. Word of mouth began to spread, and soon, I had more clients than I could handle. But it wasn't just about the work, it was the joy of seeing my clients succeed. The boutique I helped saw an increase in foot traffic and online sales, and when they told me how much my efforts had impacted their business, it felt like a validation of everything I'd been working toward. As the business grew, I faced new challenges. I hired a small team to help with the workload, and managing people was something I had never done before. It was a steep learning curve, and I quickly realized that being a good manager required a different set of skills than being a good marketer. I had to learn how to delegate, how to keep morale high, and how to ensure everyone was working toward the same vision. I made plenty of mistakes along the way, but I took each failure as a lesson. After a year in business, I decided to expand my offerings and launched an online course on social media marketing for small businesses. The course was something I had always wanted to do but didn't know where to start. I invested in creating high-quality content, recording videos, and structuring the course in a way that would be valuable for entrepreneurs who couldn't afford to hire a full-time marketing expert. It was another leap of faith. Would people even want to learn from me? Would they trust me enough to buy the course? The first month of sales was underwhelming, but then, a few key influencers in the small business space started sharing my course. Suddenly, my sales started to climb, and the feedback I received was overwhelmingly positive. It was incredible to see people implementing the strategies I taught and seeing real, tangible results in their businesses. Now, here I am, years later, with a successful marketing agency and a thriving online course business. My life is entirely different than it was when I was sitting in that corporate office, daydreaming about the future. I'm no longer waiting for the clock to tick down to 5 p.m. I'm building something every day. I've faced countless challenges along the way, but the satisfaction of knowing I took control of my destiny has made every struggle worthwhile. Looking back, I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I hadn't taken that first step. If I had stayed in my comfortable corporate job, I probably would have continued on a path of mediocrity. But taking the leap into entrepreneurship, though terrifying, has been the most rewarding decision of my life. I still have a long way to go, and I continue to make mistakes, but I'm building something real. And for that, I'm grateful every single day. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.